I slipped and started falling, and immediately remarked in my head, like, wow, there's a lot of slack in the system. And I could see kind of like a loop of slack coming in, like coming through the carabiner of my first piece of gear. I was like, whoa, going for a ride here.
Welcome to the Sharp End Podcast YouTube channel. I'm Ashley, the creator and hostess of the show. This podcast aims at minimizing future outdoor accidents by way of storytelling. Real people sharing real stories.
Thank you so much for being here on the Sharp End Podcast with me. If you can go ahead and just introduce yourself to the Sharp End listeners, and then we'll launch right into your story.
Great. Yeah. So my name's Devin Farkas. I use he, him pronouns. I live in Burlington, Vermont.
Oh, I love Burlington.
Yeah, it's a great place to live for lots of reasons. I work for one of the universities in the area. I run the outdoor programs where I train students in outdoor leadership and technical outdoor skills, group management, risk management, all that kind of good stuff. And yeah, we're a team of two. It's me and my amazing coordinator. And yeah. So that's what I do for work in Burlington. I'm on your podcast talking to your listeners about work I was doing for a different university. One of the universities I worked for, running their program, and I was guiding a trip for them in Joshua Tree National Park. So I
was it a climbing trip?
It was a climbing trip. Mm-hmm. So the course. So that program, it is an academic course. The students get like 2 credit hours for learning how to rock climb and cover the technical skills as well as the social, emotional, group management,
communication, leadership,
campcraft, all that good stuff.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And we, one of the things that I always love teaching in that course is just like crag etiquette, and like we're a group. And this is how we interact with one another, but we're also in an ecosystem of other people out climbing. And sometimes we have good experiences with the other people at the crag, and sometimes we have less good experiences. And, we always get to come back to camp and talk about like, who do we want to be within the climbing community. And so that's always a fun added part of the trip. That's just, beyond the, like, this is how you belay and this is how you build anchors. And yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So you're in Joshua Tree National Park with a group of students. How many students were on this course?
So there were 7 students total, and it was myself and another instructor. All of those students they're all part of the same university. It's an academic course. They all were belay certified at the university's climbing gym, which when I was there, I developed the top rope and lead climbing curriculum to model the AMGA's climbing wall instructor course. And the person who I was co-instructing with, I had trained to be an AMGA climbing wall instructor, and so knew that he had provided that curriculum to these students. So it's kind of a cool program in that, like, I was going out and guiding a group of new climbers, but I knew that they already had a pretty substantial background in climbing skills. So that was kind of a cool added component to the course. So we were already starting off on a pretty solid foundation. So there were 7 students, 2 instructors. We were out there for 10 days. Myself and my co-instructor arrived 2 days earlier than everybody else. He had only climbed in Joshua Tree once before. I've led I think this was my 5th 10-day course out there. And so we spent 2 days so I could kind of like show him the approaches and show like this is a
Site
good top roping
orientation,
site. Right. Yeah,
claiming your
exactly.
camping spot for your 7 students.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
flaking the rope.
Right. Right. Yeah. All that, all the kind of like figuring out where to go, how to get there,
Mhm.
picking our day one spots, and when if folks are feeling strong, we can go here. If folks need something where half the group needs something hard and half the group needs something easy, we can go there. But just a good like 2 days of orientation for the site.
What time of year when was this? What
Oh,
was
this was sorry. Yeah, this was January. So me and my co-instructor arrived January 1st, and then the students arrived on the 3rd or 4th. Our first day of climbing was the 4th.
January
Um,
of 2024 of this year?
yes. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. This year. Yep.
Fresh.
Fresh. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Just over a month out from the course. So on day one, like I know that my co-instructor shared like this is the student population. It's a mixture of folks that have climbed outside or haven't climbed outside, but they've all been through the top roping course, and some of them have been through the lead climbing course. And we agreed that regardless of that, I haven't met them. So day one is just going to be a day to like make sure that we all have the foundational skills ironed out, and kind of like redo the belay test, even though they've all been belay tested, and just kind of like orient them. The way that I always think about it is like, even if folks have climbed before, if they're coming on a 10-day trip, it's like they've just landed in the land of Oz and they're just like wide-eyed and like, whoa, we're in Joshua Tree National Park. This is wild. And so everyone needs a refresher. I needed to see that they could belay. So day one was casual and fun. We dropped a bunch of top ropes at one of the more popular top roping sites, Trash Can Rock, which doesn't make it sound fun, but it's actually a pretty good beginner spot. I think we got like 8 routes in just in the morning, and everyone got on all of them, from like 5:02 to 5:10. Broke for lunch, and then the second half of the day, we did some lead climbing where me and my instructor were leading and had the folks who had done a lead climbing course on campus. We ran through all the skills again, for the differences between lead belaying and top rope belaying. Made sure that those that were providing the belays could give out slack, take in slack, how much slack they should be giving, what their job is, what would happen if the leader fell, pointing out all the gear placements. And so the afternoon was really focused on what the majority of the trip would look like, which is the instructors leading to set up the climbs. Ultimately, like there is a lot of good top roping in Joshua Tree where you can walk to set up the anchors, but only doing that really limits the amount of terrain you can cover. And the purpose of the course is to allow students to progress into rock climbing and kind of like see the full scope. So we, yeah, the goal is to get into lead following and building anchors and that kind of stuff. So
Mhm.
so the second half of the day, we went to Echo T, and Echo Cove, and had some like 2 or 3 more routes, a little bit harder, and all of the students were belaying, and all went smoothly. All was great. So yeah, things were. I mean, like day one with the students was awesome. We got like
Wow.
full day of climbing in,
Yeah. Full
um,
value.
full value. Yeah,
Yeah.
it was just
Uh-huh.
it was super. Um,
Everyone's charged, everyone's stoked.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
like yeah, day one in Joshua Tree. Many folks had never climbed outside before ever. They're coming from the Northeast winter, to sunny California. It's just like amazing. um, so then we're at like debrief that night. We're talking about, like tomorrow we'll go at a different pace. We'll probably split up with one guide and 3 students and one guide and 4 students. We'll go to the same area, but wanted to know, they were all looking for climbs that were a bit harder than we had done on day one. So we decided to go to the ice cream parlor. Is that what it's called? no, the Dairy Queen wall. On day 2, there's a lot of good options for easier crack climbs. My instructor and I were like, all right, goal for day 1 was like just like shake off the jitters of like, woo, we're in Joshua Tree. And then goal 2 is to kind of like train them on the different styles of climbing in Joshua Tree. So there is some really good face climbing, but the bread and butter I feel like is slab climbing and crack climbing in Joshua Tree. And so we're like, let's go do some easy crack climbing. We'll go do some easier slab climbing so that we can build on the progression there. And the Dairy Queen wall seemed like the perfect fit for easier crack climbing and more lead follows and that kind of thing. So that was our plan for day 2. And then dun dun dun, ominous. Day 2 is the day that I broke my ankle. So we went to the Dairy Queen wall is a short approach from the car. It's about 300 meters to a boulder scramble up to the base. And then there's 2 sides of the Dairy Queen wall. There's Dairy Queen right, Dairy Queen left. They're separated by a small buttress. If you needed to, you could kind of like yell from one side to the other, but you don't have line of sight. I was with 3 climbers on the left side, and my co-instructor was on the other side with the other 4. All 3 climbers that I was with were when I was deciding who to ask for a belay, they shared that all 3 of them had taken the lead climbing course back on campus. And so then I explained where we were going and asked who felt most comfortable providing a belay. Well, I'll just for the sake of anonymity, I'll say Bill, made up name. Bill offered to belay, and I clarified again with Bill what we expect from a lead belay, what to expect from me as a climber, the communications that I'll be giving him. If I were to fall, what would happen? I asked him to demonstrate feeding out slack, taking in slack, and catching a fall before heading up. The first climb we set up was Leap Year Flake. It's a 5.7, about 100 feet. Really awesome climb. So after reassessing that he felt confident and comfortable belaying with the gree, feeding out, taking in slack, I set off, set up the climb, no problems, came down. All 3 students were super excited. After I came down, I think Bill climbed one, and then another student was starting to climb when we started talking about, all right, what route should we set up next? And that's the next route, the Adams family. So 5.9, also about 100 feet, just to the right of Leap Year Flake, is the route that I broke my ankle on. So I've been kind of like going over and over, like, what was it that led to me breaking my ankle? And so I have a very detailed explanation of the specific climb and what happened. So bear with me.
Oh, I'm going to bear.
So we, the Adams family is a 5.9, and just to the right of it, I think the name is Lurch. It was a 5.8, and I was trying to decide, like, should I climb the 5.8 and then set up an anchor that can service both the 5.8 and the 5.9, or should I just climb the 5.9? Looking at the 5.8, it didn't look very appealing. The guidebook had it rated as 2 stars instead of 3 stars. It kind of looked like there was like a block leaning up against the wall that, like, maybe would interfere with the climb. So it just kind of like it looked less appealing. There was maybe a risk of falling at the crux and landing on a ledge. And I hadn't done either climb. So I was like, I might get to the top of the top of the 5.8, realize that it's no good to set up an anchor for both that and the 5.9. And then we're just going to, maybe waste some time on a climb that doesn't look so much fun. So I decided to set up the 5.9. After climbing in Joshua Tree for 2 days, I was feeling really solid. typically my on-site grade is 510A to 10B, and so 5.9 was
So
well
well
within.
within your ability
Yeah,
level. Yeah.
yeah. So I'm like, cool. Like I'm not really nervous. But given that it was 5.9 and the first route we did that day was a 5.7, I kind of like re-explained to Bill, like, all right, your job is to catch me if I fall. I'm more likely to fall on this one than the previous one.
So same guy that belayed you on the first climb volunteered to belay you on the second climb.
Correct. Yep. Yep. And we were looking at the climb. The base of the climb was a little bit sketchier than the first one, so we built a ground anchor. And both he and I looked to, because it's a climbing course, I was just like thinking out loud, like, okay, cool. So my first piece of gear is going to be there, which means if I fall, you're going to be pulled in this direction. So yeah, let's put the ground anchor here so that you'll get pulled into the ground anchor instead of getting pulled away from it. And we'll make sure that when the system goes tight, you're in a position of comfort. So we had just a longer conversation about what happens if I fall. But I already felt, we were building on the previous experience where he had demonstrated that he could belay properly. So I start up the climb. It's feeling great. I get up to the crux. The name of the route is Adam's Family, also, and then like in parentheses, also known as go left or go right. And so I get up to the crux, and like that's in my head. I'm like, oh yeah,
Left or go
do I go
right.
left or do I go left or do I go right here? And I start up going right, and I'm like, this feels more forced than it should be. I think I should probably go left. And it came back down, and my foot slipped. I was about a foot or two above my last cam. So sorry, backing up a little bit. I had 3 pieces of gear in. I was about 40 to 50 feet up. My last piece was a number 1, a red Camelot, and it was between my hips and my knees. And so I wasn't really concerned about falling also. So I was like, if I were to like run out, the decision to go left or go right may have already passed. And I'm like, well, I'm already committed. But being that I was right above my piece, I was like, well, I'm just going to step down and move over. I slipped and started falling, and immediately remarked in my head, like, wow, there's a lot of slack in the system. And I could see kind of like a loop of slack coming through the carabiner of my first piece of gear. I was like, whoa, going for a ride here. And then my foot must have hit a knob on the left side of the wall. And
Your left foot or
immediately,
your right foot?
my left foot. And there was no pain on impact, but like there was immediately I knew and felt something internal that I had never felt before in my leg. And I was like, that is broken. So I finally, the Bill does catch my fall, and I'm hanging about 15 feet above the ground. And, he's like, dude, are you okay? I'm like, no, I broke my ankle. I need you to lower me to the ground. He says, should I call the other instructor? And I say, no, not yet. Yes, but not now. Please just focus on lowering me very slowly to the ground. And then from that point forward, we're kind of like in rescue mode, which is interesting for me. I've been a part of rescues and evacuations, but it's always been for someone else. And now,
not for your own.
Yeah, yeah. Now
Yep.
it's me as the instructor needing to do a self-rescue and manage the group dynamics and coach. Right.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a big job.
It was a lot. But adrenaline is an amazing thing. Throughout this entire time, there was no pain in my ankle. I was like maybe it's just dislocated. There's no pain. And was able to like very, very clearly and cognizantly coach my students through like, I need you to pull the rope on the other climb, but what about the anchor? don't worry about the anchor, just pull the rope. We're going to get everything down and everyone on the ground. I need everyone to come to where I am, bring all of our stuff over. The med kit is in my backpack. So I'm kind of like coaching through everything to get everyone kind of like rallied around me, so that we can start to move out to the car. The rescue went really well. My belayer, who I'm calling for now, Bill, had a certification in outdoor emergency care, which I think is the standard that ski patrollers have. It's kind of like an analogous to woofer. And so he started making a splint for my ankle. Fortunately, I could wiggle my toes. I could feel my toes. There was full capillary refill with my toes. So there was no reason to like reset my foot or anything, which was very, very happy for that. Which my students were like, should we reset it? And I'm like, don't touch
They're
touch
wanting
my
to use
ankle.
the wilderness first responder skills.
Yeah,
They're like,
yeah,
he's not got,
yeah,
doesn't have that capillary refill, and
yeah,
has
yeah.
lots of sensory motor circulation. Let's bend his, yeah. And
Yeah.
you're
They're
like,
like
nope,
traction
no
into
knee.
place.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm like, do not touch my ankle.
Splint this thing in
Yeah,
place and
yeah,
evac me to the car. Let's go.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they're like, what? Do you think should we keep climbing? And like, no. What do you think about tomorrow? I'm like, we're not there yet. Let's just get down to the car. So we finally got, all of our equipment. There was another party climbing next to us, and they were super, super helpful. They ended up cleaning gear from the route that I fell on, and offered some words of encouragement. But getting down the boulder field was pretty easy. There's something about like the 3-dimensional nature of boulder scrambling where you can use all of your appendages. So I can like scooch on my butt and like balance with my hands. My students were really helpful at kind of like spotting me as I was sliding down some steeper boulders. And then really like the harder part was getting the 300 meters from the base of the boulder field to the car. I ended up just hobbling with a stick all the way back. There was some suggestions of like carrying me or like building a litter, and I was personally not feeling very comfortable introducing any extra potential for me to fall. It's like, I don't really want to be carried right now. We did try like 2 people on either side and with me with my arms over their shoulders. But there was a height difference, or they felt uncomfortable being my students, whatever it was. It didn't really pan out. So I ended up just hobbling 300 meters with a stick, out to the car with them cheering me on. It's pretty fun.
Fun is the word that you would use, huh?
I mean, in some respects, yes. Like my ankle was not hurting me at that point. I had no clear sense of like what the trajectory was with my injury. And so like I was just like chatting with the students and, cracking jokes and having as best a time as possible getting out to the car. The adrenaline was still pumping at that point. So
This was day 2 of the trip. So then,
yes, this was day 2 of 10
10-day trip.
days. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was a pretty big bummer, for everybody. Fortunately, the format of the trip, and Joshua Tree is pretty versatile. So there was still the opportunity for them to go out top roping with the other instructor. So we weren't like game ender. We were like, ooh, how are we going to restructure this trip if Devin can't be guiding? So, I mean, after that, it's a little bit more like medical technical. I went to the ER. They were super helpful, reset my ankle, suggested I see an orthopedic surgeon. I booked a flight to go home earlier than I should have or intended to, and then got to the ER back here in Burlington. They gave me a diagnosis with a pylon fracture, which is really common in car accidents. Essentially, the head of my fibia or tibia, where the talus kind of like rolls around in it, just like shattered into a million pieces. Um, yeah, I know it sucked. And my surgeon was like, I mean, it's not the worst we see. The worst we see is when the talus goes like all the way into the tibia. But yeah, yours is pretty bad. um, so 2 surgeries, 4 nights in a hospital, 2 plates and 13 screws. I'm now a month out from my final surgery, and I have a pretty good scar, and I'm laid up on the couch.
With a 3.5-year-old son.
Yep, dog and partner. Yep,
Wow.
yeah. It's I mean, I can save this for the lessons learned component of your podcast, but there's something that I feel is like really interesting in the risk calculation of likelihood versus consequence. Um, I've always I've always known conceptually that the consequences are greater than just the injury. There's the like you're injured and that hurts, and you're going to be off your feet for a while. And I've known and then there's the financial component of paying for the hospital bills, and
You can't
um,
work. You can't go to
and I
work.
can't go to work, and
So
yeah, and so like all of that's always this is
your
my
bills
first.
don't stop.
Right, exactly. And so this is my own personal first major injury, and so it's I'm going through my own learning experience of like what the reality of that is. So like I've known it conceptually, but like now I like actually know like, oh, that's what it means to be off your feet for 6 months.
It sucks.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, I'm only a month and a half in, and I've made some really fun wooden models. Um,
Oh, look at you.
yeah, I made a fire engine. My son loves it. It was a lot of fun putting it together. um, but yeah,
Well,
so
so yeah,
yeah,
I do
sorry.
want to know. So you kind of alluded to it that you have some lessons learned. What are those?
Yeah, so for me, there's kind of like 3 components. One is the um, guiding and like climbing guiding within the industry. There's this known wild card that is the student belay. And so like some organizations say that the guide will never be belayed by a student. That's why we always have 2 instructors. And so there's no such thing as the student belay for a climbing instructor leading to set up a climb.
That's an
Um,
interesting idea because in my world you're really limiting the progression of the student, and it takes away the power for them. Like you're not empowering them to feel confident in their skill set. But
right,
that's what I subscribe to.
totally. Well, and I'll say like my own personal opinion is everyone learns to belay with an ATC,
Hmm.
and yeah, they're going to belay me because this is rock climbing. There's a belayer and a climber, and part
Hmm.
of learning to rock climb is learning and understanding the responsibility that the belayer has, and that it's not a one person show; it's a team effort.
Hmm.
So yeah, I've been reflecting a lot on both of those things, on like um, the student belay as a learning experience for the student, and teaching belaying with an ATC. So I've always been kind of I mean, I'm not that old, so I can't say I'm an old curmudgeon, but I'm definitely a curmudgeon when it comes to ATCs versus Grigris. I've always like found that, when regardless of what we say with a grigri or an assisted braking device, that it's not auto locking, it's just an assisted brake. When you're teaching a new climber, like, hey, this thing is is not going to brake for you. You still have to hold the brake strand. And then the top rope climber falls, and they look down, and the device catches the fall. And like, yeah, they held the brake strand, but like they're not actually feeling the climber in their hand on the brake strand. They're feeling the device catch the fall. So regardless of what we say, like physically, they're learning that the device catches. And so I've always felt that teaching belaying with a gree kind of like breeds complacency in like, well, yeah, he says I have to pay attention, but like I got this backup on. But regardless of that, if Bill was belaying with an ATC and Bill is a new belayer, even though Bill has passed the belay test in the gym for top rope climbing, has demonstrated competency with lead belaying with lead belaying, so like he's passed the test, but he's still a new belayer, and things are different outside. Um, I worry that if Bill were belaying with an ATC,
You might have
with
hit the ground.
I might hit the ground. Right, exactly. Like ultimately, like the gree that he was using did arrest my fall. Whether or not his hand was on the brake strand, I hope that it was, and I'm pretty sure that it was, just based on knowing him as a belayer. But yeah, so my my lesson learned here is, as someone who's professionally guiding, we're rock climbing has so many risks, and there is a factor of, it's just a numbers game, and the more you do it, the more likely you are for the perfect confluence of things to happen. And if you're instructing, you're not just introducing that risk in your personal life, but also your professional life. And so why add additional risk when you don't have to, if there is this extra tool, assisted brake device, that I can use to add an extra level of insurance to prevent an injury for myself while I'm working. So definitely, sorry, I'm a little bit all over the place, but one lesson learned is my own personal, for professional guiding, I will personally only now take a belay from a student using a gree after they've demonstrated proficiency using a gree to belay, even though it goes against my own personal philosophy on teaching belaying with an ATC. Yeah. So that's one thing. The other two components are like how this experience is like a perfect example for how I teach risk management in my courses. And so the two components of risk management are that in how I teach it are, there's like how you measure risk as likelihood versus consequence. So like, what's the likelihood of an incident happening, and then what's the consequence of the incident happening? And then, so that's like part one of risk management. And then part two is that incidents happen regardless of their likelihood or consequence. They happen when subjective factors and objective factors combine. So like, the cliff is there. If one were to fall off the cliff, it would be bad. And so like, the cliff presents an objective hazard. It's my own personal human desire to climb the cliff that prevents a subjective hazard. So with this specific example, there's a subjective hazard of me lead climbing. I'm going to set up a route by lead climbing. There's always the chance of the lead climber slipping, and that happened. I slip on rock. That happens. There's the objective hazards with a specific climb. Some climbs are overhanging, and so there's no chance that you're going to catch your foot on a knob and break your ankle. But this climb happened to have the objective hazard of a knob sticking out on the left side. And then there's the other subjective hazard of belayers. Even the most proficient belayers sometimes get distracted. The sun catches your eye, and then you look down, you're like, that's too much slack in the system.
Dog's barking, and you turn away and look at the dog for a second.
Right. So even in an ideal situation, we're humans, and
Yeah.
we can get distracted, and so even if Bill was doing a 99% proficient job at belaying the entire time, in the exact moment that I fell, there was too much slack in the system, and I fell further than I had to. So you have like three things. Sorry, and I'll back up. I've been guiding for 15 years, and I've been taking student belays on ATCs for 15 years, and I've taken much bigger falls because of too much slack in the system, because it's a new belayer. and I haven't gotten injured. This is like my first injury in 20 years. So, and this is a conversation that I had with Bill. I was like, look, Bill, this is not your fault. This is a confluence of factors. We all have agency in it. There was certainly something that you could have done differently. But I don't want you to like hold this shame on your shoulders for the rest of your life that you broke my ankle, because you didn't break my ankle.
Mhm.
Um,
That was nice to hold space for that conversation with Bill.
yeah. And we actually had a really good conversation. You know, I think first, and I've had this conversation with family, and they're like, so he got an F, right? Like, how do you not hate Bill? And I'm like, well, I mean, like, it's not like my buddy who dropped me rock climbing. Like, this is my student it was his second day ever rock climbing outside, ever belaying outside. And so, like, it's different. And so it's actually, and I was chatting with my colleague who's also a climbing guide. Um, it's hard to debrief with folks who aren't outdoor instructors, because, like, you know, my parents are like, see, told you rock climbing was dangerous. I'm like, people break their ankles playing soccer. People break their ankles falling down the stairs. People break their ankles raking the leaves.
Mhm.
And so, I mean, like, yeah,
Probably more often.
right. I'm like, I've been climbing for 20 years, and this is the first time I've ever had to go to the hospital.
Mhm.
And I actually, like, I crunched the numbers, and I was like, of all of the routes I've climbed, 0.13% of the routes caused me to go to the hospital. I'm like, those are good odds.
Yep.
um, anyways, I got off track. I was talking about all of the different factors, the subjective and objective hazards that all at one time came together and led to the incident of me, the perfect storm of me breaking my ankle. And so, like, do lead climbers slip when they're climbing? Yeah. Does it always cause an injury? No. Um, and, you know, and I shared with Bill, you know, sometimes lead climbers, they run it out because they're feeling bold. And that's a hazard. And sometimes it ends in a bigger fall, and sometimes it doesn't. In this specific instance, I felt like I was climbing really safely. I chose a route that didn't have any obvious features to break my ankle on, which now seems ironic. And it was well protected. I had a really solid piece of gear before I fell, and so, like, of all the climbs that of the pitches that I've climbed, like, it felt like a fairly safe climb. Um, but anyway, so subjective factor, I slipped. Objective factor, there was a knob on the climb that my foot could hit. And then subjective factor, um, for one reason or another, there was too much slack in the belay. And so those three things combined led to a broken ankle.
Yeah, I'm just trying to process what you're thinking and feeling now a month later, and what your student is, what Bill's thinking and feeling now a month later. And but yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, I think what was interesting, you know, when I first spoke with Bill, we had a pretty frank conversation about uh, the shared agency of belayer and climber. And I think at first, Bill, as my student, didn't fully recognize, like, you know, with a student teacher relationship, like, the guide's responsible. And
Mhm.
so I think that's how he first viewed the situation of, like, well, I mean, like, you're the guide and you got hurt. Like, it's not really my fault.
That's
And
interesting perspective.
yeah, and like, I can understand that perspective. And I was like, I understand. And this is where we're at. Like, you said on belay, and what that means is you're going to catch me if I fall. And I know from the previous climb and the previous day that you pay attention when you're belaying, because I saw you do that. And there are many things that can cause an incident. And really, the one thing that I see that could have been actively avoided is on the belay end, which is too much slack in the system. Um, so, and I told him, I was like, Bill, it's not your fault. I don't blame you for my broken ankle, but you do have agency in the outcome of this incident. Um, and I was really thankful for his maturity in um, having that conversation openly with the rest of the group. Because I also shared with him, I'm like, look, man, like this is a climbing course, and one of the lead instructors just broke their ankle. It's pretty important that we debrief this whole experience with everyone on the course. But I want to make sure that you feel good about what we're discussing, and that you have agency in processing this with the group. So if you want me to share everything that I just shared with you, I'll do that. If you want me to share my piece and then open the floor for you, we can do that. But I was really grateful for his maturity in agreeing that it's something that we had to talk about as a whole group, and for me to share my open, frank, honest assessment of what could have gone differently, and how things can transpire in the climbing environment. So that was really cool.
Great. Yeah, I'm glad. I think debriefing is massively important, um, to give everyone the space to see each person's perspective, and honor that, and not shame and not judge, because that's how we can learn from other people's mistakes.
Totally. And that was, one of my fears going in was like, man, I hope everyone on this course isn't like scared of climbing now.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm like,
Which does happen though.
totally. And I'm like, if you were scared of climbing, I would understand. You just saw someone break their ankle.
Yeah, I mean, I've
And
interviewed people on this show who have dropped other folks and have told me directly, like, I will never, ever, ever belay somebody again,
mhm.
because they hold that guilt and they will not forgive themselves, and that's a bummer, you know.
Yeah,
So
totally.
you can't force anybody. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I understand. I understand that sentiment, and it's what's been interesting is sharing this story with other people. I've been learning more stories that I didn't know. Someone shared that their dad had a pretty serious accident, and I was like, "What? I've known you for years, and I had no idea that that was part of your life." But in sharing accidents and how they happen, and debriefing with friends, and it's amazing the things that you learn when you're on a different playing field. You know. Yeah, I think like folks are more comfortable sharing their own mistakes when they see that you have also gotten injured, or gotten hurt, or had a mistake. It's like,
mhm.
oh yeah, that
I
happened to
don't
me
feel so
too.
dumb. I don't feel
Right.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's what I'm trying to help change with this culture of how we shame and blame each other and ourselves for mistakes that we or others make, when nobody is invincible.
Totally. One of the things that I've been working hard on with the leadership training course that I run is trying to explicitly share my own mistakes with my students. Um, and this one, like this incident specifically, I think is really valuable in that, like, there's part of it that I think is easy to look at an incident like this and be like, oh, well, as the climbing guide, he should have had his belayer with a backup belayer, or he should have triple checked that he knew how much slack to give out, or wasn't there a ground anchor? There was a ground
There
anchor.
was, yeah.
Yeah. And like there's all these things that we can kind of like pick apart and say that's why that person got hurt, and
Mhm.
point to some flaw or some mistake or something that they missed, as if you would have done better in that situation.
Right.
And the reality is, like, we're all human, and like none of us are robots, and even when we're operating at 100%, we miss something.
Yes.
And so like the
Absolutely.
reason we have like the reason our climbing systems are so redundant, the reason we have, when I build a climbing anchor, it's minimum 3 pieces, but when I teach top rope anchor building to new climbers, I'm like, you want 2 legs. Each leg has 3 pieces,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Because you're like, I just want that insurance policy of like you double, triple check that cam and that cam and that cam, and but did you double, triple check that one? Because even when we're trying our hardest and we've had an extra cup of coffee, we miss something. And so there's always some kind of way that we've trained ourselves to back ourselves up because we know that we're human and we're going to make a mistake. And for me, it's been hard to not like when I communicate to folks, like I'm not bragging about myself. I'm not bragging about how many boxes I can tick when I'm out climbing as a safe climbing guide. I'm just trying to articulate like these are all of the boxes that I ticked for risk management, and still this happens.
Yeah.
And it's like this just happens sometimes. And so like when it happens to you, don't feel shame, don't feel guilt, like, or not don't, right? That's a
Try
shame and
not
guilt
to.
are normal human emotions and feelings. Like, but when you feel that sense of shame and guilt, just remind yourself that it's like these are the things that happen. Like rock climbing is dangerous. This is what we mean when we say rock climbing is dangerous. We mean that there are unmitigatable risks that if we were to take them out, it wouldn't be rock climbing anymore. And like the reason we find value in the sport is because it looks a specific way. And if we were to take out this risk, that risk, this risk, it would no longer be rock climbing. It would be riding the auto belay up the wall
Right.
at the climbing gym. And that's not what we're trying to do. And like, sure, I'm sure that may become part of the industry at some point, and people will have fun doing it. But it's
That's not why we do it.
That's not why we do it. Yeah, it's not why I do it. And I think it's definitely hard to articulate to folks like my parents who don't rock climb. And like, it's not that the reason that I rock climb isn't because it's risky. And there's part of what's appealing about rock climbing is one of the things that makes it risky. And that's like, there's that element of unknown. There's the element of, can I do this? It's possible that I'll fall and break my ankle. And there's like developing the skill to meet that challenge and uncertainty is kind of like what brings the joy of
excitement.
Climbing. Like, yeah, totally. I mean, it's why it's like, it's funny. Like, why do we watch scary movies? Because we like getting scared.
I don't like watching scary movies, actually. I'm not part of that group.
Yeah. Fair.
Nope.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for sharing.
Yeah. Thanks for listening. It's definitely been, I feel like I reached out the day after this happened, and it was actually really helpful for processing, for my own processing of the incident, to explain it to other people, to share it with other people. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe to this channel, and remember, play hard and be smart.